Everyone. Today, we are excited to be here for our Fashion Business Executive Roundtable. I am Ye, and a founder of Yushkova Design, and I help brands and retailers to build high-performing private label, optimizing end-to-end processes, and scale profitability. Our today's topic would be is to think about how to leverage licensing for a strategic brand expansion. This is a topic that we've been asked by our clients to cover for quite some time. So we're really excited to be able to speak about this today and really help you to think about how it will separate your brand from growing laterally and potentially allowing you to grow exponentially. It's really becomes a golden ticket to many fashion business owners, and often it's overlooked. And when it's done strategically, it's difference between being a regional brand and becoming a global legacy. Licensing is a really important factor to think about, especially if you have a really strong brand presence. Whether you are an emerging label ready to expand your IP, or whether you're a manufacturer looking to grow through licensing partnership, this roundtable is your invitation to see licensing as a growth system, not a gamble. Licensing is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood tools in the fashion business. Many founders view it as a later stage growing to play. However, sometimes we think about reserving for brands like, and thinking about that it will potentially work only for brands like Ralph Lauren or Barbie as an example. However, and more about the established brands. But really, the truth is, licensing is accessible and scalable when it's structured strategically. When it is actually strategized and be part of a long-term strategy for a established brand that has great presence and has already performed well within their categories. How even for the established brands, it really helps them to unlock new categories, new geographies, right? New revenue without scaling their internal operational exhaustion. And we often think about, how manufacturers involve in from just making products to building their brand equity by becoming licensees of established labels. But here's the catch. Licensing is both opportunity and risk. If it's done right, it's a great multiplier and allows you to expand into categories that you're potentially not in right now. But if it's done wrong, it actually can erode your brand faster than the clearance rack will be. And the reason is because today, when we break in licensing down into three key areas, we want to really think and pay attention to what are the common pitfalls might potentially be that we see often that happens, and what are the things to look for when you actually setting it up. We're going to be covering and talking about maximizing growth through licensing overall and the strategy and how strong the strategy could be for your brand. We're going to be talking about how to then guard your brand identity because that's a number one important piece that we want to make sure that we do not jeopardize the integrity of your brand by doing licensing. And how to really architect profitability through a performance review of your particular license. We also going to be answering some Q&As since we are broadcasting this live. And feel free to please leave your comments so that we are able to be able to answer to your questions. If we don't address it in our roundtable live because we didn't get to it, we will definitely do it offline. But I want to also take a moment to really thank you for everyone who is watching this, who is participating here in our roundtable every month. For anyone who is also registering and later on going to be watching this recording later, this really helps us to understand that we are part of a really strong growing community and we are here to support one another. We're here to learn from one another. This is not a sales call, so don't rush to drop off towards the end. This is really created for a safe atmosphere for us to share our ideas and cover pressing topics that are on top of our minds as we're growing and expanding our brands. But let's really start talking about how we can grow through licensing. And what is the growth here? And licensing really is the fastest way to multiply your brand presence without multiplying your overhead. When we talk about growth with clients, most founders default to launching new lines or entering new markets themselves. That's a slow capital intensive path if you think about it. However, licensing, when it's done right, lets you go and do it faster by leveraging others people's infrastructure and distribution and their expertise. When it's done right, you are really monetizing your intellectual property, letting trusted partners produce and distribute under your name while you collect royalties and maintain control. But the secret really is in alignment. Licensing must extend your brand DNA, not distort it. Think of Ralph Lauren expanding into home goods or Michael Kors into fragrance lines. Every extension feels authentic because it aligns with the partner's brand's lifestyle positioning. And that is a number one key is to make sure that when we are thinking about licensing, we are truly evaluating the alignment of licensees that we will potentially grant the license to. Thinking about licensing is fundamentally about scaling your brand IP, right? And you're allowing someone else to manufacture, distribute, or sell products under your name while you are thinking about the ways that you can strategically fill in the gaps. And those gaps allows you to be able to grow and expand. They might lack of really, if you might be lacking an in-house expertise in categories like footwear, eyewear, or fragrance. Licensing will allow your brand, as an example, to extend into those categories. For example, going from a handbags to footwear to jewelry, it feels like a natural transition. But it's sometimes and more often premature is to bring that and do that in-house. If you have a strong IP and a strong brand following, it is more there's more opportunity to grow faster and exponentially if you are doing it through licensing and if you're doing it right. Or if you want to really test potentially new regions without building physical presence. For example, going into Asia or European markets by using local licensees. Or you want to strengthen potentially your customer touch points through lifestyle extensions that reinforce your brand DNA. It's really become a brand halo effect. Licensed categories create visibility and drive back to core products. Licensing creates you new revenue layers, royalties, minimum guarantees, marketing to co-funds without really the operational drag. But the real magic happens when the licensing aligns with your core brand equity, and that is the must. For instance, if you know that you know your craftsmanship and you're really known for the product that is very unique and tactile, your license really expansion should express that same craftsmanship in adjacent to the categories that you're expanding into. You're not just expanding products, you are expanding your perception of your brand. And that is very, very critical. Mary, thank you so much for sending your question to us. How do I determine if my brand is ready for licensing? A brand is really ready when you have consistent sales, recognizable IP, and a loyal customer base. It's not about the size, it's really about the clarity. Your brand must have a distinct, protectable identity that partners and is not replaceable with anything else, and you cannot replicate it. If your brand story isn't clear enough to brief the partner into that meeting, you are really not ready. If you don't have a strong brand following and as well as sales that are actually showcasing that this brand is performing even within different product category and performing well across multiple retailers and D2C channels, you are not ready for this. But if you are at the point of the tipping point of how to take and explode the growth beyond your regular D2C and wholesale channels, this is a great opportunity and a long-term strategy that a lot of the brands should strive towards. Often we also asked by our clients, what type of licensing makes sense for a fashion brand? And I often would like to start off by three categories to think about why do licensing and whether this is right for you. Think about product licensing, which is expanding into adjacent categories like handbags brand licensing or eyewear brand licensing. Or if you're doing it based for territory licensing, allowing you and regional partners to handle manufacturing and sales in specific geographic territories that you're potentially not in. And another one to think about is a co-branding or sub-licensing, which is strategic collaboration that leverages dual audience. It has each of those places are able to and must define clear deliverables, quality standards, and revenue expectations. And if those two brands that come together in the sub-licensing opportunity or co-branding opportunity are aligned on their vision and making sure that the product that they co-brand and create is actually speaks to the demographic and answers their needs, it could be a very fantastic and successful program for both parties. We often start with product and territorial licenses. And then product licensing expands your portfolio into new categories, while territory licensing lets regional experts handle markets you cannot open indirectly. And for mature brands, co-branding can also be lucrative and managed carefully in ensuring that each deal that you are structuring actually helps you to play towards your brand DNA and not go against it because it could really truly hurt your business if it's not done right. And then jumping into really deals for short-term cash is not the way to think about licensing. There's many opportunities that will open up, and as you start opening up, that you will become a licensor and license your product. But many brands sign agreements with manufacturers who simply want to use their name. That's not licensing. That really helps you to dilute your brand. And real licensing partners really invest in marketing, they'll invest in product development, and they'll invest in your growth. Never exchange your brand equity for immediate revenue. This is one of the number one pitfalls that we see that with the clients that come to us to help them with their strategy and licensing, where they see shiny opportunities and they jump right into them without really analyzing whether this opportunity is actually up place towards their brand or down place towards their brand. You have to think about the long term when you are doing those deals. And it's okay to walk away from the partners that are not suiting to your brand equity and to your brand DNA. The wrong partner will cost you sometimes 10x later in recovery and rebranding efforts. So it is really critical to understand which partners you're going to license to and ensuring that they're vested in your brand equity and be able to keep the brand integrity the way that you've been working towards so hard to build up. Once the growth begins, we are thinking about the protection of your IP, the protection of your brand. A poorly managed license can damage your brand faster than any bad review. Remember that. Growth is exciting, but here's where the licensing can backfire. It's the loss of control. And if you lose that control, it's going to be very difficult to rebuild what it took you years to build so far. If your brand shows up inconsistently in packaging, inconsistent price points, or product quality, for the worst case scenarios where we often see that the product quality does no longer match to where the actual authentic brand was at one time, you start to lose customers. You start to lose the trust of those customers that you have worked so hard to build. And the long term, it will damage and can also override all of the efforts that you've put into your brand over the royalty checks that you potentially be covering if they're from the licenses that are not done well and signed with the right partners. You really must safeguard your identity of your brand legally, creatively, and operationally. Licensing is not just an agreement, it's a governance system. You need to layer of control, approval rights, audits, and clear brand guardrails. Brand integrity in the licensing is really depends on three pillars, right? Legal protection, creative oversight, and operational governance. So those are the three things we need to remember when we are thinking about licensing and protecting your brand integrity and your IP. Every licensing agreement must clearly define ownership of IP, territory rights, duration, and product categories. Include blacklist clause for categories that you never want to associate your brand with. For example, if you're a sustainable label and you might want to prohibit plastics or fast fashion materials or brands that are potentially might be wanting to sub-license and license your product, I'm sorry. Every licensing agreement must include the creative approval clause and termination rights for the brands who are not following what you are putting into those clauses. Think about creative oversight. Really require an approval rights for all designs, samples, marketing, packaging, and retail visuals. You are in control of your own license and your own brand. So putting the approval process together is very critical, and making sure it's really explicably explained in your contracts with those particular licensees. Sophisticated brands also often set up a brand approval board where an internal review team or consultants who acts as your final gatekeeper to help you protect your brand equity and your brand identity, and making sure that all the approvals flow through against not just comparing to a style guide, but also looking from the perspective whether this particular product or this particular way of the planning to use your license is actually going to upplay towards your brand equity. For our clients, we often assist with the development of the brand assets library, approved imagery, logo formats, really tone of voice and lookbooks, which we call it all as putting together into one style guide. We also introduced digital approval workflow where it helps them to do a shared portals for share the approval process for packaging and sample approvals. Use it in where it becomes more easier for licensees as well to get the approval processes done in advance so that they could be able to quickly expand within the market. We also help them to look on the operational side. We set measurable quality standards that tied into licensees' KPIs. Can include return rates, compliance with the brand audits, and sustainability benchmarks as an example. Don't really really think about and don't rely on the goodwill of those licensees to do what you're asking them to do. Rely on the system that you create and put in place to ensure that the approval process happens before the product goes out and be sold to the public. You create an approval portal or digital brand guideline library that ensures all partners access the same assets tone, and visuals. This prevents the broken telephone effect across regionals and categories. Even often within internal teams, we might be updating our guidelines and our library. If you are still relying on PDFs and emailing copies back and forth to your potential licensees, you're also risking that one of those licensees eventually will be working from the outdated style guide. So thinking about how to do it as a digital portfolio where you can link everyone to come in and pick up the assets and pick up your style guide and always keep one sense of truth of the latest and greatest version allows you to avoid some of those pitfalls that often happen and come as your licensee's portfolio starts to grow. Megan, thank you so much for sending in your question. And once again, just want to reiterate, we are broadcasting this live. So if you are watching this live right now, feel free to add comments. We are going to see those questions and we'll try to address them. If you are not able to see the during the live event and you're watching it after it's been recorded, you're still able to come in and add the comments. We will reply to everyone as they are coming in. So Megan, thank you so much for your questions. How do I protect myself legally if license procedures poor quality or counterfire revisions? So include a termination for clause and clause tied to a quality violations. You should also have really inspection rights where you have an ability to audit their production facilities at any time. Also, pre-register your trademark globally before you sign any deals. That will help you to prevent from it being knocked off in a different parts of the world that you potentially did not trademark. And this is actually extends to everyone who is listening on this call. Before you start doing licensing and license out your brand, you want to make sure that you trademark or at least pre-registered globally. It really becomes a prevention, and this prevention is much cheaper than later on doing litigations. It's an enforcement and for not just only works for its IP, but it also helps you to protect your brand in every territory covered. The other thing for us to think about is should I really include the exclusivity clause or not into the agreements that we're working on? And often when you are approached by large retailers, they potentially would require or ask for an exclusivity. I would say that you proceed that with caution because exclusivity can really motivate strong partners, but it also can limit your flexibility. Instead, really, I would suggest structure performance-based exclusivity. If a partner hits a volume or revenue milestone, it helps you to then update your exclusivity agreement. And if not, it really helps you to revert and for to non-exclusivity status if they are not meeting the volume or the revenue milestones that you have put together. This keeps them motivated while protecting your future options. And can the smaller brands really benefit from this licensing complexity and complex deals? If you really are just a brand that's starting up and you don't have a following yet, you don't have strong sales, you're not at that tipping point where you need to exponentially grow your brand, but you already have a strong presence, this might not be a strategy for you at this moment. However, if you explore that options and understand what goes into it and what you need to do in order for that to happen, it's good to start early and making sure to include that as part of your long-term strategy. Because licensing also to ramp up to it, it takes time. Sometimes it could take anywhere from 6 to 12 months just to set it up and sign your first contract. So thinking about, again, layering in it at what point of your business projections you should be layering in licensing is probably important for you to think about if you are just starting your brand. Use specialized licensing counsel or consultants instead of large firms. They may really offer you a flat fee deal, reviewing of the template-based agreements, but the key is really ensuring your contract covers IP protection, royalty structure, dispute resolution, and terminations. Cutting corners on legal reviews is most expensive savings you'll ever make. So making sure that you are working with the right firm to help you with the licensing piece and not just to structure it, but also to manage it at later days, to help you be able to understand the approval processes and what it takes, help you to make sure that your style guide is always up to date and on brand. And it also helps you to ensure that your portfolio of licensees are all up playing towards your brand equity instead of downplaying it. The most successful licensing programs are managed like a business unit, not just a side project. And we often have clients who come into us with idea of potentially doing licensing or co-branding deals, and they often are just treating them as a side project to their main business. Licensing profitability comes from ongoing governance. Regular performance reviews, measurable KPIs, and incentive structure protect your long-term margins. Licensing isn't a sit in and forget it type of a revenue stream. You must manage it as any other division of your business with reviews, audits, and optimizations to ensure that you are delivering the best results and to ensure that you are not diluting your brand equity with wrong partnerships within the licensing space. The best run licensing programs use performance dashboards where they can track royalties, product sell-throughs, brand visibility matrix, and partner compliance. Start with establishing minimum guarantees as well as part of your licensing contract. Base royalty amounts the partner must pay annually, really to regardless whether they of their performance. It first gives you a little bit addition to your revenue, but it also helps you to lock in licensees that are able to at least project that they could be able to deliver the performance that you require. This ensures that your brand receives predictable revenue and filters out unserious licensees. In these really tight royalty rates, to reward scale and marketing investment. Implement quarterly business reviews where you're going to track royalty performance versus the forecast. Evaluate marketing investments for each of the licensees. Review product development roadmaps and audit visual and brand alignment is a key here. Add escalation clause also for strong performance. For example, increase royalty rates after a certain sales threshold, or extend categories rights upon consistent overachievements. Licensing should feel like a partnership with upside, not a static transaction. This is why we often are involved in the licensing deals with our clients for a long period of times to ensure that we manage the partnerships and relationships of every licensee and to ensure that it delivers the results that were initially projected. Often we are asked, when by our clients who are thinking about licensing, is the royalties and what other royalties are typically to expect within the fashion industry for your brand if you are going to be doing licensing? Generally, it could be anywhere between 8 to 12% of the wholesale revenue. And that would be very much benchmarking with what the industry standard. There are some higher and there's Really rarely we see any lower rates. But beyond the flat rates, you want to also consider a tiered royalties that reward volume and marketing investment. You should also include the advance payments that apply against future royalties, giving you upfront cash flow without really capping an upside. This is a great way to structure those partnerships and showcase to your licensees that you are also vested in them and you want to reward them for growing and helping you to open up those opportunities of different categories or geographical spaces for your brand. Create, make sure that you also create a corrective action plan. We're giving partners a defined window, whether it's 60 days or 90 days, as an example, to resolve issues like low sales or non-compliancy. And if they fail, you trigger the termination and relocation clause. This maintains accountability without immediate burning bridges. Brands goes through up and downs as well. So you want to be able to give them time and opportunity to course correct if you're seeing that something starts to go off the rails. To ensure that you're able to really have a strong partnership, like in relationship, versus just a transaction. Look at the brand expansion matrix to understand what is your true ROI beyond just royalties. You want to look at new customer acquired that you are going to get from either or getting or get from your new licensees. Increase visibility in the new markets. Think about the media exposure. And also think about the wholesale inquiries from the new categories. The best licensing deals are brand accelerators, not just revenue streams. Always balance the tangible royalty with the intangible equity growth. And this is where we often have really deep conversations with some of our clients who are considering licensing because they often do not think about and see all the other intangible parts of benefits that helps them to gain in addition to extra revenue stream when they are structuring these licensing programs in the right way. So thinking about how you are able to take your brand to that next level is not always necessarily black and white to where you want to expand your wholesale market and you want to continue expanding your D2C market. You might want to sometimes step outside of the box and think about, is there another way for us to be able to expand our brand exponentially without putting extra burden on our operations and our existing resources? Not always doing everything in-house and yourself is actually an upside for your brand. Licensing isn't about giving your brand away. It's about allowing it to live and grow beyond your walls while you stay in the driver's seat. It's about letting it live everywhere where it deserves to be. When managed licensing strategically, licensing transforms your business model. You shift from managing SKUs to managing your IP. You multiply reach without multiplying headcount. You build a legacy brand that scales sustainably and organically. Your brand goes from chasing growth to designing the growth path. And if you are exploring licensing, whether you are just the brand owner of already established brand or potentially just a manufacturer who is looking to grow through the brand partnerships, this is your momentum to build strategically, not reactively. I encourage you to connect after this session, and we will share the link to our free discovery call at the end of this video. so that you are able to connect with us. And we would like gladly discover and brainstorm with you whether the licensing is right for you. And if it is, what would be the next path forward? We will help you to build a roadmap to ensure the consistency of growth and that the strategy of licensing will align with your long-term goals for your brand. Let's discuss your brand potential fit for licensing and the next practical steps to evaluate readiness. I really want to thank you and thank everyone who is listening to this live, who is participating on a monthly basis in our roundtable, and most importantly, who is later on watching the videos and providing us feedback and comments. We love to hear from you. We host the roundtable every first Tuesday of the month, always at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find the topics for all of our roundtables for the year in our LinkedIn company page at Yay Designs. And we are excited to have you here. I really want to thank again for everyone who stayed tuned for our next Fashion Business Roundtable and helps us to think about how we will be looking at agile private label partnerships and how to structure those. Make sure that you follow the page from our LinkedIn so that you can also get latest updates. And join our executive community on LinkedIn. We are really excited to be here. Thank you very much, and I look forward to see you next month.